Okay, here we are. Welcome to session number 168. That's 168 of Kevin Reads A Course in Miracles. All right, once again, just a little study group. All right, I think it probably helps me more than anybody else. But here we go. I'm glad you're all here. We are in chapter 21, which is entitled Reason and Perception. All right, remember how when the Course uses reason, it's talking about seeing things, going to the right mind first, as it were. Going to the place where the memory of who you are resides, where the Holy Spirit is. All right, the Holy Spirit holds that memory for you. And asking to see correctly, have your perceptions changed. All right, and perception comes with the belief in separation. All right, that's why we have to work on it and have it corrected until we get back to the major correction, which is this choice between the oneness and the idea of separation. Alrighty then, so that's chapter 21, Reason and Perception, and today we will be on section 4, right, IV. Right. I'm always tempted to make a nursing joke, but enough of that already. Be serious. All right, Roman numeral 4, section 4, the fear to look within. The major fear of the human condition. The major fear of the human condition. The ego thought system, as if it were a person, the ego, that part of our mind, right, which wants to reinforce the belief that we are separated from God, we are separated from our source, wants to keep us mindless, wants to keep us out of that part of the mind that remembers who you are, right? And part of that process of getting back to that memory is going to the right mind, right? And asking, help me to change my perception. I really desire peace. I want to see things correctly, right? So you're working your way back, and the ego don't want nothing to do with that. Ego's not having it. So it tells you go to your mind and God's going to kill you. God's going to get you. All right, they'll use a euphemism here. God will strike you blind. Right, just tell, to say you're going to encounter an angry God. You did something wrong. Right? As God said to Abraham in the Dylan song, next time you see me coming, you better run. So let's just get to it before I go off on many tangents. Session number 168, section 4, the fear to look within. Paragraph 1. The Holy Spirit will never teach you that you are sinful. Errors he will correct, but this makes no one fearful. You are indeed afraid to look within and see the sin you think is there. This you would not be fearful to admit. Fear in association with sin the ego deems quite appropriate and smiles approvingly. It has no fear to let you feel ashamed. It doubts not your belief and faith in sin. Its temples do not shake because of this. Your faith in sin is there, but witnesses to your desire that it be there to see. This merely seems to be the source of fear. Right? Your faith that sin is there, right? You believe that if you go into your mind, you will encounter some horrible thing about yourself, right? It says your faith is that sin is there, but it just proves that you have a desire that it be there. You actually want it to be there. So because if you sinned, right? And remember that sin is equated to separation from God. You believe you're separated from God, then you exist. Right? You exist as an individual. All right? So you want to continue to exist as an individual. That's what Jesus means by you want it to be there. You want that sin to be there. Right? So it's a crazy mixed up system, but it works. Right? The ego's insane, but the system is, it works. Right? The ego says, don't look, and we believe it, don't look. And Jesus is telling you, you don't want to look because what you want to be there is there, the belief in separation. Right? And he's trying to tell us it's just not there. All right? But the ego tries to keep us out of the mind above all else. Don't go there. All right? So many myths involve the idea of not looking. Don't look. Right? Don't go there. And he says the Holy Spirit will never teach you that you are sinful. The Holy Spirit will never teach you that you are separated from your source, the source of all love. Right? And he says the errors he will correct. And he says, and this makes you can't be afraid of that, to have your mistakes corrected. You are indeed indeed afraid to look within and see the sin you think is there. Right? And the ego likes it, he says, because fear and associated with sin, the ego thinks is appropriate. Because the fear is what keeps you out of going to the mind. Okay? Paragraph 2. Remember that the ego is not alone. Its rule is tempered, and its unknown enemy, whom it cannot even see, it fears. Loudly, the ego tells you not to look inward, for if you do, your eyes will light on sin, and God will strike you blind. This you believe, so you do not look. Yet this is not the ego's hidden fear, nor yours who serve it. Loudly indeed, the ego claims it is, too loudly and too often. Right? For underneath this constant shout and frantic proclamation, the ego is not certain it is so. Beneath your fear to look within because of sin is yet another fear, and one which makes the ego tremble. All right? And we'll just go to the first sentence of the next paragraph. This is what makes the ego tremble. What if you looked within and saw no sin? Right? That's what the ego is afraid of. That you will go into that quiet space in your mind and you will ask for your perceptions to be corrected. And eventually you will be, it's given to you to be aware that you never separated from God. There is no sin. And the ego is afraid of that. Because if there is no sin, if you never separated, the ego is gone. Let's look at this second paragraph. All right. The rule of the ego is tempered, and its unknown enemy, with whom it cannot even see, it fears. All right. So the ego rules yelling and screaming at us not to look. Don't look. Right? And the enemy, which it's never even seen, right? It fears. Right? And what the enemy that it fears is the atonement. The idea that you never left the mind of God. Right? That's what the ego fears. Because once you accept that, the ego's done. All right? Loudly, the ego tells you not to look inward. All right? It keeps us busy out here. All right? It just keeps you busy with your body, with other bodies, with situations all around the world, distractions. Excuse me. You know, distractions in the place where you live, in your family, in your town, in your city, in your state, in your country, in the other countries in the world. It's all chock full of busyness and distraction, right? And cause for fear at times. Okay? And so you don't have time. I can't stop for a moment and ask the Holy Spirit, help me, tell me what I'm looking at here. Help me to see it correctly. Or tell the Holy Spirit, I want to be peaceful. Help me to live in peace throughout this situation. All right? So the ego keeps yelling at you. Don't go there. Don't look within. Because you're going to see how sinful you are. You're going to see what you did. You're going to see that you destroyed heaven. All right? You separated from the oneness. You broke the oneness. All right? That's what you did. That's what you're going to see. And God's going to find you and strike you blind. In other words, going to kill you. All right? He says, this you believe. You believe this nonsense. And so you don't look. So that's what Jesus is telling us. You believe that you're going to find an angry God. So you'd rather not. You just deal with it. Deal with everything out here. All right. Yet, this is not the ego's hidden fear. All right. The ego's not afraid of an angry God. What it's afraid of is the atonement. What it's afraid of is that there is no sin. There is no separation. That's what the ego's afraid of. That's why it keeps telling us, don't go there. All right? Oh, I'm going to meditate. Oh, but first I need coffee. Right? I think I'm going to meditate, but let me adjust the temperature in the room. Let me get a comfortable chair. Right? I'm going to take a walk in nature and just think, right? And then I get distracted by all the insects, right? Or you didn't dress right, or whatever. Ooh, the ground is muddy. Whatever it is, we get distracted. Because inside we're afraid to go there. We're afraid to look within. Because we think we're going to see a sinful self. All right? But deep down inside, that ego thought system, which we have taken on, all right, we have taken it on as a costume, so to speak. The ego's afraid that you're going to realize you didn't separate from God. And it's done for. All right? So paragraph 3. What if you looked within and saw no sin? This fearful question is the one the ego never asks. And you who ask it now are threatening the ego's whole defensive system too seriously for it to bother to pretend it is your friend. Those who have joined their brothers have detached themselves from their belief that their identity lies in the ego. A holy relationship is one in which you join with what is a part of you in truth. And your belief in sin has been already shaken. And now, nor are you now entirely unwilling to look within and see it not. So he's describing us where we are on our path. Right? And he says, once you put a crack in that ego, right? You know, once you start questioning the ego, then the ego doesn't even pretend to be your friend. All right? It's just going to keep on luring you, distracting you with all kinds of distractions. Okay? But he says that those who have joined their brothers, all right? And we do that by realizing I don't want to project guilt onto the other, onto my brother. All right? I don't want to project guilt. I want to see them correctly. All right? I'm willing to see them correctly. All right? He says, you've detached yourself from the idea that their identity lies in their ego. Right? So you've detached yourself. I want to see them correctly. I don't want to say who they are by what they're doing, what they look like, what they're saying. All right? I'm willing to see who they really are underneath that act that they're doing. Underneath what they believe they are. Right? So I've joined my brother. I joined the other. Right? And that is a holy relationship when I want to see the truth about the other. That's the holy relationship. All right? A holy relationship is one in which you join with what is a part of you in truth. I want to join with the oneness. I want to join with the innocence. Right? That's your desire now. And so you're joining with that part, which is something that is a part of you to begin with, that we just forgot about. Right? And your belief in sin has already been shaken. So your belief in separation from God has already been shaken. All right? So here we are on that path. All right? We're questioning the ego. All right? And your belief in sin has already been shaken. And nor are you now entirely unwilling to look within and see it not. So he says you're little by little, you're becoming less and less afraid of looking within and realizing you never left. All right? Jesus knows it's a process. Okay? But guys like me, we have to realize that just because Jesus knows it's a process, I can't get too lazy and say, oh, well, I'll just do that tomorrow. You know? Jesus always says, why wait? Why wait for heaven? All right? I mean, she's not going to get angry for me for being a procrastinator. You know, never put off until tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow. Sometimes I'm like that. But this is a process. Jesus says, why do you want to wait? Why do you want to wait? And he knows it's a process, right? But he says, you're not entirely unwilling to look within now. You've already started. You've already started to doubt that you're entirely separated from God. You've already started to question the tenets of the ego. And your belief in sin has already been shaken. Your belief that you're separated from God is already being questioned. All right? And your belief in sin has already been shaken, nor are you now entirely unwilling to look within and see it not. Soon that's what will happen. In a moment, we will look within and see there is no sin. All right. Paragraph 4. Your liberation still is only partial, still limited and incomplete, yet it's born within you. All right. Not wholly mad, you have been willing to look on much of your insanity and recognize its madness. Your faith is moving inward, past insanity, and on to reason. And what your reason tells you now, the ego would not hear. The Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind the ego now knows not of. No more did you. And yet this part, with which you now identify, is not afraid to look upon itself. It knows no sin. However, or how otherwise, could it have been willing to see the Holy Spirit's purpose as its own? All right? So he says, I know you're working on it. Your liberation, your freedom from the thought system of the ego is only partial. Okay? It's incomplete, yet it's there. It's born within you. It's growing. Okay? We woke it up. Okay? We gave birth to it. And now he says, you're not entirely crazy. You're not wholly mad. Right? Not wholly mad. You've been willing to look on much of your insanity and recognize its madness. Right? He says, you're willing to look at what you're doing, what you're thinking, and realize how crazy it is. Right? He says, you're willing to do that. And your faith is moving inward past the insanity onto reason. Right? Your faith is moving inward to the right mind, to that part of the mind that the ego doesn't know anything about. It just knows that if you go there, it starts to get weak. All right? And we're moving past insanity on to reason. All right? Reason is when we will see things correctly. Your faith is moving inward, all right? And what your reason tells you now, the ego would not hear. Right? And what my reason tells me now is my corrected perception. Even those little bits that I keep bringing in for correction. All right? Reason will show me the corrected perception. And he says, and the ego doesn't know anything about that. Doesn't like it. All right? And it doesn't want to hear it. It's not that it doesn't know about it, it just doesn't want to hear it. All right? I'm willing to see his innocence. The ego goes, no, what are you, crazy? The only way to get rid of your guilt is to project it. Right? And Jesus is telling us, no, the way to remember your guiltlessness is to be willing to see it in others. Right? And remember, he knows that your path it's incomplete, but you're working on it. Right? So the ego doesn't want to hear any of this. The Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind the ego knows not of. Right? And no more did you. You didn't realize you had a right mind. You didn't even realize you had a mind. Right? Until that one day when something just said to you, there has to be a better way. What is happening here? This is insanity. Right? I mean, some of us get pushed to the edge, to where we have to question everything. And that's the invitation to the Holy Spirit. That's the opening to the awareness that I have a part of my mind that is calm, that knows who I am, and I can go there for guidance. Right? I can go there for respite. Okay. So the Holy Spirit's purpose was accepted by the part of your mind the ego knows not of. So the return to oneness, the allowance of the memory of who I am to arise. I awakened that. Right? That's the part of the mind that I forgot about. I didn't know I had. Right? So. And he says, and yet this part of the mind, with which you now identify, it's not afraid to look upon itself. So this part of the mind is not afraid to look upon itself, because it doesn't see a sinful self. All right? It's only there to, at first, guide us and help us correct mistakes in our perception. But it's not afraid to look at it because it knows it's part of a grand hallucination. It's part of a dream. It knows no sin. All right. Sentence 8, paragraph 4. It knows no sin. How otherwise could it have been willing to see the Holy Spirit's purpose as its own? So that part of our mind that we forgot we had, it doesn't know any sin. The sin doesn't exist. All right? And therefore it was ready to accept the Holy Spirit's purpose, all right, of remembering the oneness, remembering the connection to God. And we take that purpose as our own. I want that memory. I want that peace to arise in my mind so I can have that memory. All right, paragraph 5. This part has seen your brother and recognized him perfectly since time began. And it desired nothing but to join with him and to be free again, as once it was. It has been waiting for the birth of freedom, the acceptance of release to come to you. And now you recognize that it was not the ego that joined the Holy Spirit's purpose, and so there must be something else. Think not that this is madness, for this your reason tells you, and it follows perfectly from what you have already learned. Right? So our reason, right, our right-minded thinking, all right, it tells us that there must be something else besides the ego, because the ego didn't choose to find the memory of who I am. The ego didn't choose to use Jesus as my guide and my brother. It says the ego didn't choose that, so there must be something else. There must be another part of the mind. Right? And he says, and don't think that this is madness. Right? This is not madness. Right? The ego would have you believe that's crazy. You know? I'm just having memories of a friend of mine who I said something that I didn't want to do, the dishonest thing. And he just looked at me in disgust. And he just said, well, yeah, you're an idiot. And that was the end of the discussion. And he didn't use those words. But that's the way it went, you know. But at that point, I just told him I don't want to do that. You know, and I didn't even know the course at the time. It was just like, inherently, innately, I knew that was not the right thing to do. Right? And he just said, well, you're an idiot. I said, okay, whatever. But at least I didn't have that burden of guilt, you know. So he says, think not that this is madness, all right? Don't listen to your crazy friend. Right? You're an idiot for believing that. All right? Paragraph 6. There is no inconsistency in what the Holy Spirit teaches. Right? This is the reasoning of the sane. You have perceived the ego's madness and not been made afraid because you did not choose to share in it. At times, it still deceives you. Yet in your saner moments, its ranting strikes no terror in your heart. For you have realized that all the gifts it would withdraw from you in rage, all the gifts that it would withdraw from you, right, in rage at your presumptuous wish to look within. He says, you don't want that. A few remaining trinkets still seem to shine and catch your eye, yet you would not sell heaven to have them. All right? I mean, basically, that was that's what I was just talking about. I don't want to sell, my whatever connection I felt to goodness, let's put it that way, at the time. I don't want to bail out on that. I didn't want to be traitorous to that. All right? And so I was told I was an idiot. Right? Anybody would do that. But in your saner moments, its ranting strikes no terror in your heart. So in your saner moment, you realize the right way to go. You're not afraid of the ego in your saner moments. Right? You know the ego is just insane. It's crazy. Right? For you have realized that all the gifts it would withdraw from you, right, in a rage at your presumptuous wish to look within, right, you do not want. So the ego goes, oh, look, you're going to miss out on this. All right, so what I was missing out on in that little story I was telling you was money. All right, consistent money coming in every month or every week. Right, and all I had to do was basically lie about how I got to this point. Right? Without being too cryptic, I had to write down on because I was moving out of state, but I could have used unemployment, but you only get unemployment at that time if you got fired, right? But I didn't get fired, I quit. I left the job to go study something else, right? And to study that something else, I had to go to another state, right? So my buddy goes to me, well, what are you going to do? Aren't you going to tell him, aren't you going to collect unemployment? I said, no, I didn't get fired, I quit. He goes, oh, you're an idiot. Because I could have had the check sent to the other state, right? So those are the gifts the Holy Spirit says, the ego says you're going to lose those gifts if you do that. You're going to lose that money. If you do the ethical thing. So he says, in your saner moments, you're not afraid of that. You're not worried about that. All right? I hope I'm not confusing people here. All right? At times it still deceives you. Yet in your saner moments, its ranting strikes no terror in your heart. All right? For you have realized that all the gifts that the ego would offer to you, all right, it says they're going to take away from you because of your presumptive wish to look within. Right? You're going to lose all this stuff if you go looking within to find who you really are. Right? He says, you don't want that. You don't want all those things that the ego is offering you. Really, what you really want is peace of mind and the knowledge of who you really are. Because with that just comes a joyous outlook on your life, a happiness, an understanding, an ability to be compassionate, an ability to love and understand everyone and everything. Who wouldn't want that? When the ego says, no, don't go there, you're going to lose out on all this. Right? You're going to lose all your family and friends and your job. The ego threatens you with all kinds of stuff. All right? But he says, you realize after you don't really need those things. You don't want those things. What you want is your happiness, your peace of mind. And you'll still be able to walk down the street and see the world with corrected vision until you are done. All right? Because we could still walk around this earth and bring that message with us. And that way the body becomes meaningful. All right? Until we join God. And we're not afraid to do that. All right. A few remaining trinkets still seem to shine and catch your eye. So he knows this is a process. All right? We still think there's something here that I want. I mean, everybody. I mean, there are a certain amount of people on the earth who have risen to what they would say in the East was a self-realized human being. They realize who they are and how they fit into the universal scheme of things. All right, there's quite a few people, all right, but a lot of us are still thinking that there's something here for us. There's something here. All right, he says that doesn't make you bad. It just delays the process. All right, ultimately doesn't make you happy either. So, he says you'll see that after a while you'll see these trinkets, but you realize you don't want to sell that peace. You don't want to sell that happiness to have them. Okay? Okay. And now the ego is afraid. Paragraph 7. Yet what it hears in terror, the other part hears as the sweetest music, the song it longed to hear since first the ego came into your mind. The ego's weakness is its strength, the song of freedom, which sings the praises of another world and brings to it hope of peace. For it remembers heaven, and now it sees that heaven has come to earth at last, from which the ego's rule has kept it out so long. Heaven has come because it found a home in your relationship on earth. And earth can hold no longer what has been given heaven as its own. Okay, so now the ego is afraid because you're beginning to see the ruse. You're beginning to see that it's not worth it. What would I rather have? this peace that passes all understanding. I can't describe how peaceful the mystics would say. All right. Or would you rather, compete for that new job, compete for whatever it is you think you need? Or behave in a way that will get you things. It's a lot of work too. So now the ego is afraid. Yet what the ego hears in terror, which is there is no sin, right? You never left the mind of God. The other part of our mind hears that as the sweetest music. All right? The other part of the mind, the right mind, hears it as the sweetest music, the song that it has longed to hear. Ever since the ego first came into the mind, right, we've been longing to hear that song that says, you never left, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything wrong. Your Father is here. Right? Or, if you have a better relationship with your mother, a more loving relationship, your mother is here. That's the song we've been longing to hear ever since the ego entered the mind. And the ego's weakness, is the right mind's strength. So the ego's weakness, it gets weaker as we put our faith in the atonement and the fact that we never left. All right. So the ego's weakness is the right mind's strength. Okay. The song of freedom, which sings the praises of another world and brings to it a hope of peace. So this part of the right mind, it sings a song of peace in our mind that we're longing to experience. Right? For it remembers heaven. That part of our mind remembers heaven. Okay? And now it sees that heaven has come to earth at last, from which the ego's rule has kept it out so long. Heaven has come because it found a home in your relationship on earth. All right, the seeds of heaven are born in our right mind when we first are willing to see differently. I see that I'm projecting guilt. I see that I just don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like what I'm doing. There's something wrong, and you go inside and you just say, "Help me to see correctly." Right? The seeds of heaven are sprouting. All right. And then eventually, heaven has come because it found a home in your relationship on earth. And earth can hold no longer what has been given heaven as its own. Right? So this earth form can no longer contain, right, what it's been given, what heaven has given us. Right? That's the end of paragraph 7. Paragraph 8, look gently on your brother. And remember the ego's weakness is revealed in both your sight. What it would keep apart has met and joined, and looks upon the ego unafraid. Little child, innocent of sin, follow in gladness the way to certainty. Be not held back by fear's insane insistence that sureness lies in doubt, this has no meaning. What matters it to you how loudly it is proclaimed? The senseless is not made meaningful by repetition and clamor. The quiet way is open. Follow it happily, and question not what must be so. So in other words, look upon your brother gently, not projecting guilt. All right? I'm willing to see the other through the eyes of gentleness. It's another way of putting it. All right? And just remember, the ego's weakness is revealed in both your sight. All right? So the ego's weakness, the insanity of the ego is revealed to us. And the more and more we just reject it. All right? Because what the ego would keep apart has met and joined. The ego wants to keep every individual apart. But we have met and joined. And we do that by, I'm willing to see the other correctly. It doesn't matter what they're doing or saying. I'm willing to see the truth that's past the sidewalk act. It goes right past their hustle. Whatever it is. We're willing to see past it. Right? And you don't have to know how to do that. You just be willing to do it. All right? And that's how we look on others, with gentleness. Look gently on your brother. All right? Then he's very gentle with us. He refers to us as little children. He says, little child, innocent of sin. Right? Follow in gladness the way to certainty. He'll say, come with me. Let me lead you through this. Follow the way to gladness. Follow in gladness the way to certainty. Right? You will be sure of who you are. Be not held back by fear's insane insistence that sureness lies in doubt. All right. The ego will insist that you are separated from your source. All right. He says, this has no meaning. All right. What matters it to you how loudly the ego screams at you? What matters it to you how loudly it is proclaimed that you are separated from God? Right? The senseless is not made meaningful by repetition and clamor. Okay? The senseless is not made meaningful by repetition, even though they keep saying it over and over again, and by saying it loudly, the clamoring. He says the quiet way is open. Follow it happily and question not what must be so. All right. Follow the quiet way and question not that you are joined with God. You never left. That's what must be so. You are one with God. The quiet way is open. All right. Look gently on your brother. All right. Be willing to have your perceptions changed. And that's all you need is the willingness. You don't have to know how it's done. You just need the desire, the willingness. All right. You are innocent of sin. Follow in gladness the way to certainty. Okay. Alrighty then. Thank you for the opportunity. And I will see you, in a way, next time inside out.